Christine was kind enough to draw this for us, but it was a collaborative effort. So in the center, of course, we have Test Coach Camp as our hub. You might expect that the coaching branch would be the only one, considering that coaching was what we were there to generally talk about.
Well, there could be a testing branch.
Maybe, but
That's crazy.
there's no testing branch. So off of coaching, we had a variety of activities that we discussed and tried out. We had Paul Carvalho's game, people who did not want to be coached, EDGE, which was a Boy Scout thing, right? Career paths, including self-teaching and teaching young people testing. Because we weren't talking about only people who are already in the field, we were also talking about people who are not in the field or who might become members of the field. And then we had some things that were a little more traditional, automation and exploratory testing, including paired exploratory testing and automated exploratory testing, which is a term that's a little bit under discussion, and we also came up with a clarification there. Computer assisted. So since it was a meeting of a lot of folks who'd never worked together before, we learned a lot about organizing meetings. So one thing that I spent some time reading about before I even arrived was the open space, and it turned out to be different from what I had expected, even having prepared myself. But we also learned that having a high density of smart people in the room made for a very different experience, including learning a lot, but also somewhat humbling to be in that crowd. And one of the best parts was games that is accessing the learning in a completely different way. So some of those were the logic puzzles that I'd seen before, but we also had some physical activity, including juggling, so that was fun, and hit you with a stick, which I hear actually didn't happen, which is quite unfortunate. But simulation, and my favorite was testing soap bubble mixtures. So that's our mind map, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail individually.
Thank you, Claire. Now that we've covered as a group what we learned, a few people have prepared some things, and a few people were willing to just sort of speak off the cuff. I don't know. Scott, we're not planning to do like your name, lightning talks, right? Like yesterday.
No, there's no need to go with any more formality than you guys are comfortable with. We're looking for lessons. I'm playing with cameras, and I'll ask you guys some questions to help fill in the audience as you go.
Come on up, Michael, unless you're busy.
Okay, no, I just wanted to say that it's a go.
Awesome.
They were all on board.
So this is Michael Larson. He was at Test Coach Camp as well. He talked about EDGE, which was the Boy Scout, a mechanism that he uses to teach
Okay, thanks.
teach Boy Scouts stuff and to coach Boy Scouts about stuff. Would you like to talk about that on camera?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So effectively, I'm going to want to scoot in here and look there. Thank you. So the whole point about EDGE, and one of the things that EDGE represents, it is almost a branded model of the Boy Scouts, but the idea behind it is universal. EDGE is an acronym. It stands for Explain, Demonstrate, Guide, and Enable. And it also follows on the stages of if you're working with a team for the first time and you're a leader or you're a teacher or you're just trying to impart new skills. There's a continuum, and the EDGE process works with all of them. The idea that we were trying to present is that when you first want to impart a skill to somebody, whether it's something simple or something complex, your first step is to explain that skill, whatever it may be. As you're explaining that skill, very often it is a matter of, I have information and I am giving it to you and you need to listen, and it's kind of almost a dictatorial approach. You know, I say, you listen, and that's the way it goes. The demonstrate process is where you sit down and you get that individual or group together and you physically show them what they need to do and get their hands dirty with you. So now you're no longer just imparting information and it's not just a one-way street. Now they're in and getting involved with you so that they can understand what they need to do. As an example, when I was demonstrating this, I was showing how to do what's called a chain sinnet knot or a monkey braid. It's a process where you take a rope and you shorten it by making loops in it. And it's something that a lot of scouts learn how to do just for when they're camping and backpacking or hiking or have a need to do that. And it's a complex enough task that it does require some demonstration and some practice to get it right, but it's not so complex that you have to put a lot of time and energy into it. And that's why it's a good way of teaching this. The next step is guiding. And so the idea when you guide somebody is you're not demonstrating it anymore. You're putting it in their hands and letting them work with it and letting them process that information and try it out for themselves. And they may make mistakes or they may ask you questions. And you then take that time to help them solve those or answer those questions or solve those problems. And by doing that, they then get the experience that you already have. And then the final step of the process is you enable, or as Wade said, empower. And I think those are both good terms for that, in the sense that now you've handed off the skill to them and you encourage them to teach it to somebody else. And once you've done that, the process starts all over again. Now that person explains, demonstrates, guides, and enables or empowers. Every time that we do this, most of us do this unconsciously. We're not even aware of the fact that this is what we're doing. So the next time you decide that you are in the process of teaching a skill to somebody or you want to explain some new feature of your product to somebody, stop and take a look at how you do it. I'm willing to bet you're doing each one of these 4 things. Now you know what it's called.
So Michael.
Yeah.
Now, just in general, I know that I've learned a ton from coaching youngsters, scouts, sports, etc. Just how much in general, I know you just talked about EDGE in particular, but how much in general do you find that that same skill translates when you're working with adults?
Very much so. The different thing that you'll notice when you're working with adults is that, to put it bluntly, kids are more receptive. They really are. Up to a certain point, kids are open-minded. They're willing to try something. They're willing to accept, I don't know this, or there's a sense of being willing to let somebody in authority, and I use that with quotes, to let somebody in authority tell them something or explain something to them, and they'll go, okay, sure, I'll go with that. The difference with adults is that many adults have a pride factor that complicates this. And that's why we also look at using EDGE as a model, and that's why I often incorporate it with the stages of team development. And that's the forming and storming and norming and performing stuff and how it interacts. And when people get a chance to realize that they're in that storming phase as I'm trying to explain something, and they're saying, well, I don't know that I agree with that, not because they disagree with it, but because they don't want to admit they don't know something. And I try my best whenever I work with somebody. On the front, I try to show there are certain areas I am ignorant about. Everybody is ignorant of something, and that's not a crime or a shame. Ignorance is a passing thing. You can get through ignorance because you don't know something, and you get a chance to work with it and practice with it, and now you do know something. I consider stupidity or laziness much worse, and that's when you're no longer ignorant, but you're fighting it anyhow because you don't want to do the work, or you don't want to take the effort, or it's just uncomfortable to do it. And so it's easier to fight.
Understood. And, from my own experiences coaching, like I said, I wasn't at camp, I find that, and you said it, the most important thing that I can do with adults, actually it's 2 things. One is be very honest about being a peer who's helping as opposed to an authority figure. And number 2 is to actually share enough of the method you're using with them so that to kind of get some buy-in. This is the method we're going to follow. It's coaching, right? But this isn't just blind, you're following me because I say so.
Right.
It's a process. Now, Wade, you had something to add?
So, yeah, if I can grab the mic. So one of the things that I found in the juggling exercise, which I'll talk about here in a minute, so I won't give everything away. I was teaching adults a skill in juggling, and the environment in which the coaching happens, even with adults, they can still be very receptive. They can still be very open to teaching if the environment is set that way to empower that learning to happen. So I'll share on that a little bit more once we get there, but I think that's important, is that adults can learn. Adults can be willing to open themselves if you set it up that way.
Well, I think one of the things that I learned a bit about the environment and how influential it is the fear of failure is quite compelling, especially among peers who are adults. There's some sort of expectation that you have all of these years of experience, or you've done this before, or your peers might lose regard for you if you suddenly discover that you can't do something, even if there's no reason for you to have ever learned it. And I think that maybe younger people don't expect to have that knowledge, and so it's almost a violation of your expectation. I should be able to do this. And so getting over that in a very comfortable environment makes a big difference, and maybe that's part of the discussion, that you have to figure out how to set that expectation, that failure is good. Failing fast is actually something that we've had a lot of discussions about in business, and it's very hard to learn. It's hard to want to do, because a lot of people say, no, we have a plan, we're going to go with this, and there's no reason to pursue something that's not going to help you succeed.
I think that that builds into this whole situation of when you're trying to coach someone on whatever it is that they're doing for their career. You know, when you're in an actual live project where people are working, where people are trying to succeed, have a company succeed and make money, to say it's okay to fail creates this disconnect that, yes, it's okay to fail in small ways, but not in big ways that actually affect the company or affect my paycheck or affect my family. And so creating ways where you can teach, where you can fail, but outside of something that you can fail in small ways and then get comfortable with failing in slightly bigger ways, until you're comfortable with moving forward and being in a little more risky situation where the payout can be a little bigger.
Well, and I think as testers, we should be pretty comfortable with failing, right? I mean, that's the thing that we look for.
So we've got a question from someone online who asks, do adults resist as much as Michael suggests? Now, my personal experience is that, you guys started talking about environment. I believe that's another topic to come up. But my personal experience says that who is in the group and the environment and the buy-in before coaching starts is really the key to that. So my answer is sometimes, but I'm going to throw that open. And if that's part of what someone else is going to talk about, you don't have to answer that right now. But I wanted you to know that was a question that came in from folks watching us live. And Matt, I'm going to kind of ask you to drive when it's time to move to the next topic here, because I can interview all day, but I know you guys had some things you want to share with us.
That's pretty much what my next topic is. So thanks. This is free flow is working for me. So that camera, this camera, that camera. Anybody know? Where am I looking? How? That one. Hello, internet. Hello, internet. Okay. Gosh, sorry. So the two things I want to talk about. One is how humbling the experience was, much like not knowing what you're doing in front of the entire internet. But the other one was the interplay between authority and learning and environment. So I think people do resist the way we classically approach them, which is sort of powerful figure steps in and says, you need to change the way you're doing work to something you don't know how to do, in a cubicle environment where you are physically isolated from other people on your team. And if you ask for help, it's like, well, gosh, Matt's not making it, so he needs help. Okay, we'll help him. Like, it's not a genuine, collaborative, peer-level discussion in too much of corporate America today. I think thanks to the Agile movement, we've moved away from that to the point that some people can't recognize that anymore. But there are still companies that are like that. So when you have an environment of peers that genuinely have each other's best interests at heart, that no one's going to go back report to the boss because we all report to different bosses, and you create an environment where it's okay to fail, where you have examples, people are willing to try new and crazy stuff. And there's an interplay there where I think the more authority that Matt and I would have laid down, the more it's 5:00, it's 2 after 5. You have to go to the next session now. I think the heavier-handed we would have been, the more we would have stifled that environment. But of course, we had to have some structure. We couldn't just, you can go talk to whoever you want. That would have had some value, but it makes it hard for people to self-organize. Who do I talk to about what? I don't know. So we had a grid, which we built collaboratively, which we loosely tried to honor. And I was really excited by that. But the big thing was the interplay there with authority. Authority can stifle. And I didn't, it's much more subtle. It's you know, and also that the caliber of the people the conference attracted in any particular thing, whether it was specific coaching techniques, or whether it was facilitation techniques, or whether it was high volume test automation, or logical puzzles, you could find the best person in the room there would have likely one of the top 2, 3 publicly known people in the world at that skill within software testing. And that was just amazing. And in my role as a consultant, I'm the coach, I'm the go-to guy. And I had a bunch of go-to people. And that was absolutely wonderful for me. It was great.
Yeah, I just want to add something to the safe environment because I'm one of the people on the other end. I'm a manager. I have people that report to me. So this is certainly one of the issues that I encounter with my directs, that there is the question of trust. So how much should they trust me when I coach my people? This is unanswered to me still. I think there is a set of good behaviors I can do as a manager in order to gain the trust of my people. But this is something I'm still exploring quite a lot. All right. Okay, maybe we have some more questions from the internet.
That's what I'm looking for.
Very good.
Sorry, working on connections here.
I'll follow up on it then.
Okay.
While we're waiting for our kind audience, one of the things that I struggle with is trying to help people who have no background in testing to approach the activities that we complete. And so,
you hire people without a degree in software testing?
yeah, and they make the product.
Crazy.
No. So I'm not talking about testers either here. I don't have testers. I don't lead a team, and I don't manage anybody. So I'm just a doer. It's cool. And I am trying to help other doers to understand the activities that I spend all my time on. So I was expecting to spend a lot of my weekend on exploratory testing and automation, and I certainly got that. But the coaching experience is not something that I have as part of my professional repertoire. And I don't have the formal training of being a scout leader or something like a team coach. So it was very refreshing to me to see a variety of coaching backgrounds and strategies. And I am someone who likes to experiment. So having a lot of different options that were tried and true perhaps in certain contexts, but might be a solution for me, was a big deal. I like to have choices. And I don't necessarily know what to do with all of them, but it's certainly good to have them rolling around in my head so that when that moment comes, I can give it a try.
So from one of our viewers is, if Claire's a quote doer, is that not a factor of leadership? Referring to Weinberg's technical leadership organic approach, and you know, I'll kind of follow up with that and say, as a former military officer, one of the first lessons that we learn is never ask your people to do something you wouldn't or haven't done yourself. Comments, thoughts on that as part of the relevance in coaching?
I think a more important part of the coaching role is the ability to help others do their best. I think I have fairly successfully coached people on stuff that I actually don't know. It's more about helping them along, supporting them, and guiding them. In some areas, you do need sort of the expert skills, but I don't think that's a general requirement. Or I'm really good at faking.
Yeah. I would like to add to that there are different dimensions. There's coaching, teaching, lecturing, mentoring, and I'm not sure if we all have the same image of what coaching is. So I think that everybody has his or her own definition of what coaching is and what it consists of. Certainly, if it's teaching something, then it makes sense to actually know what you're talking about. If coaching is more an enabling activity, then probably it's not that much necessary to know it. If it's more kind of guiding people into their own learning experience, then it's maybe optional.
Thank you. So Scott introduced the military analogy. I'm going to run with it for just a minute. Not everybody likes that, and I won't overdo it. And not everybody thinks that way. I was a military cadet in Civil Air Patrol for a very long time and did ROTC and that kind of thing and read a bunch of books. There's a guy named W.E.B. Griffin. He's a novelist, and he wrote that one of his characters says, "When I was a cadet at West Point, I was told and I believed, and my experience has proven true, that leadership is simply this: men must have faith in their officers. To build and establish that faith, officers do specific things. They never lie to their troops. They never give an order they themselves are unwilling or unable to obey, and they never enjoy a creature comfort until the last private in the rear rank has that same creature comfort." Those words have guided me professionally for most of my career. I really believe those things. What I find fascinating, though, is that in the Army, when you reach a certain level, usually it's around colonel, you start to have units attached to you. So instead of leading frontline soldiers, now you've got helicopters, and now you've got medics in a hospital, and now you've got artillery, and people who you don't know how to do their job. I mean, you don't. And you have the same thing in management. You reach a certain level, you're supervising developers and testers and business people and integrated product teams. You can't do them all. And that's really challenging. So there was a session proposed, I didn't think it made the final cut, on how to coach people when you don't know what you're talking about. And this is a reasonable problem to have when you reach a certain level or certain span of responsibility. It's and there are lots of answers. The MBA literature says that a good manager can manage anything. That may be true, in which case I've never met a good manager. But certainly there are universal things to understand someone's motivations, try to meet with them as a human being, figure out why they want to accomplish the job and what makes them take pride in work, and help them get to more pride in work, which you can do even if you don't understand the role as well as they do. And there's literature on that for coaching for performance. And I would submit that within testing, in testing, it's usually subject matter expertise, right? Someone brings me on as a coach to do training on high volume trading system on Wall Street, and but there are things you can do, and I think we've got a lot of work to do in that area, and there seems to be enough energy to do this again next year. Question?
This isn't quite directly related to I guess it's almost a counterpoint to the military and the Boy Scout situations. In those situations, it's this person is in charge, and maybe you have to prove yourself to your team a bit, but you get to start with a certain amount of this is the person in charge. Do you have any thoughts, or did you discuss? It looks like there's a topic, people who don't want to be coached. Some of that can be, even if there's, I assume there's probably Boy Scouts who don't really want to learn to tie the monkey knots. But there's also a situation where someone is your peer and you want to help them, but maybe they don't feel like they have anything to learn from you. Or, you know, maybe even your manager has asked you, hey, could you show so-and-so your exploratory strategies? And they're not interested. What do you do with that?
I'll be quick, and then we can pass it off, because I think several of us will have thoughts on that. But so to finish the thought, when I was a cadet, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to be the man. I wanted to have commander in my title, because then I could tell people what to do. When I became an adult officer, I suddenly realized that if you're the commander, they have to do it. You don't need, to some extent, you don't need to develop your influence skills, because you can give these things called orders, right? So as an adult officer in Civil Air Patrol, I've actually sought out staff positions, because then I had to develop influence skills. And that takes a lot of work. And there are lots of things you can do, like inspiring, like discussing, like collaborating, like asking the other person their opinion, and bringing them into discussion and helping them own the outcome, that I find pleasurable. So in my chosen career as a consultant and coach, I don't have direct reports, and I don't give orders. And there's an interesting, like I said earlier, there's an interplay there between authority and I think authority can actually shut down the conversation and get people defensive and get them struggling against you. So I often prefer to interact as a peer. The problem there is you have to be invited, and you have to sort of not to be too Machiavellian, but you have to sort of figure out how to get yourself invited, and without manipulating, with honesty and with integrity. So I'm sure Michael has things to say.
Well, again, using the scout metaphor, and you brought up a really good point. As a lone tester for much of my career, or being the army of one in many cases, I am my own manager. Oftentimes I am my own coach. If I have to find out something, I go elsewhere. I go and I talk to other people in other companies, or I use forums or meetups or venues like weekend testing or conferences like this. They're vital to me. For that very reason. So I actually have somebody that I can share my experiences with, and they can share theirs, and I can confer, which is a beautiful thing. Going back to Scouts, because that is where I have most of my leadership experience outside of the testing world, there's a dichotomy that we oftentimes face, and that is, on one side, if you're a Scoutmaster, you're considered the person in charge. And the irony is that that's not true, because the person in charge of a Boy Scout troop is not the Scoutmaster, it's the senior patrol leader, who is a youth. And so we work very heavily to try to encourage these young men to take that role and to get involved. And we also, to broaden the metaphor, we also have the venturing program, which is co-ed, so that if people are bracing at me saying these boys, in venturing, there are venturing presidents who are both male and female. And it depends on who's running the program and who has the interest. And what's cool about this is that we are meant to be there. The old joke is that if a Scoutmaster who is truly effective walks into a meeting, says hello to everybody, says to the senior patrol leader, it's your meeting, and then goes and sits down. And then the only time you hear from him is at the very end of the meeting, where he gives a little pithy comment for about a minute, turns it back over to the senior patrol leader, and sits back down. For the record, I've yet to have that experience, but I'm looking forward to someday having it. What I mean by that, of course, and to bring it home, is that we need to encourage, in this case, the youth that are in the program or the members of our team. If we say that we're a self-organizing team, or that it's a boy-led or a boy and girl-led troop or crew, do we mean it? Or are we really just saying that, but really when push comes to shove, we're going to tell them what to do? And if it's the latter, we've got a problem, because we're not meeting the mission. We're not meeting the role that we're supposed to meet. If it is the former, yes, you're going to get pushback. Yes, you're going to get challenges. Yes, you're going to get, well, if we're the ones who are saying that we want to do this, well, we don't want to do that 10-mile hike. That's going to be too hard. We're not interested in that. Can we accept to say, all right, we'll scrap that? What would you rather do instead? That's the hardest thing for me to do, because I realize there are experiences that they will learn and that later they'll go, I'm really glad I did that. But I know I'm going to have to overcome this big hurdle to make that happen. And sometimes, yes, I do have to put on the big boss man hat and say, I am your scoutmaster and what I say goes. And I hate doing it because it's counterproductive. So the point is, when they don't want to be coached, you do have to say, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to do it myself, but do everything that you can to get out of the way and give them the opportunity.
Okay, so, whoa, cranked that one up too much. Two things. One, Michael, you just hit on something that it was actually the point that I was going to make. I'm also the son of a teacher. And one of the things that I talked to my dad about a lot is, now he was a middle school shop teacher, so teaching teenagers to work with wood and metal and that sort of thing. But talking to him about working with adults, he sent me down this whole research path about the contract between in that language, the teacher and the student, in our language, the coach and the coached. And it's exactly what you said. Part of coaching is that initial agreement to coach and be coached. And it doesn't even have to be you're always the coach. It just, if there's not buy-in to start with, then adults in particular are more resistant. So they have to accept the premise. And the question from the stream, which is also related right back to Michael, was how do you motivate or encourage people to accept at least trying out that model, right? I mean, different coaches and different people work better together, right? So all I ever ask from somebody is to give it a shot. And if I'm not the right coach, find a coach who's right for you, right? Because that's a very personal thing. But how do you, any thoughts on how you get somebody to accept the idea to start with?
To start with, you have to, in order to coach someone, they have to acknowledge you as a leader or potential coach. And a common workplace problem is that there are informal leaders, or that you're on the same level, like Liz said, your peers. And that usually doesn't work. Anyone who's going to be your leader and thereby your coach or mentor kind of needs to be one step above you. And if you didn't attend Georgie Kitt's talk yesterday, I recommend looking at his presentation on Jacques Stradas, because you need to have a role where you're comfortable too in order to be coached. If you're already feeling that you're doing work that's below your level, that's a great way to discourage people and make them unmotivated to receive coaching as well. And you need to have a coach that's at the right level compared to your own level. It can't be someone who's too high above you, and it can't be someone who's too close. You also need a safe environment, definitely, and you kind of need to do that whole groundwork first, showing that it's okay to make mistakes and have very clear objectives with why you're coaching. Is it to slap someone on the fingers and saying that they're not doing a good enough job, or are you there to help and support them? And if people don't understand what you're trying to achieve, they're much more likely to resist.
I would like to add something about power to that. There are several flavors of power. There is kind of expert power, then there's relationship power, and then, of course, as a manager, you have a lot of role power. Especially in the managerial role, you should use the role power very, very rarely. And it probably just doesn't work if you use the role power in order to force your people to be coached. Then you might get compliance, but it won't result in a very good learning experience. So it's, from my point of view, it's all about relationship, that you should build up the relationship with people, and that results in a willingness to be coached.
Yeah, so one thing I think is worth mentioning, when we talk about coaches, the model is commonly I'm the coacher and you're the coachee, and I'm going to sort of impart my vast wisdom upon you. I don't mean, with the people we had, it's much more noble than that. That's sort of my cynical look at it, right? But collaborating as peers is under talked about. Like, why is the assumption that I can't learn anything as coach? And the good coaches do this. Why is the assumption that I can't learn anything from the coachees? Actually, the good coaches do. They suck knowledge up from any direction that could take it, right? It doesn't always have to be this sort of one way. And collaborating as peers, so you can do something very similar to coaching with a peer, but it's really hard, especially in North America, because of fear of loss of face, of I'm going to make a mistake and they're going to think less of me, or they're going to go tell the boss about me, or someone's going to ask, why are you spending so much time just talking with this guy when you can be hands on keyboard? So I think there's a lot of room to explore this idea of collaborating as peers. The Agile movement seems to be pretty good at it, but a lot of the knowledge is implicit. The how to do it and how do you get it to happen to my knowledge, isn't really captured a lot in the literature. And I'd be interested in talking about that more going forward. I think we accomplished it this weekend, but how do we do it is still kind of implicit.
So I have worked alongside a XP development team, and there was an implicit assumption that anyone who joined the development team would be part of the paired programming. This was a way that the organization worked, and there was no room to ignore what others were doing or silo yourself. It was expected that you would engage with your peers on a day-to-day basis throughout the day, and you would be learning from one another, and the desire of this practice was to spread the knowledge so that everyone would have, if not an equal amount of knowledge, that they would have exposure to everything. And so one of the things I came here to talk about was this pairing on exploratory testing, because for me, I have an experience of pairing with other testers, and I don't necessarily know from the outset what their experience is or what I can learn from them, but doing a creative activity together inherently gives us a chance to share different strategies. And the alternatives are something that you can learn from anyone. Because they think differently, they don't need to be a different level of experience, or they don't need to be above you in the hierarchy. I think a peer is excellent for that you can have an exchange of equals and still come away, and maybe you each coach each other. It could be simultaneous. I think that's certainly something that was going on this weekend among our group, that we were all sparking different ideas in each other.
So we've got about 20 minutes left. I want to make sure, Matt, that you know that, so you can cycle through if there are things that you wanted to hit that we haven't yet. There are some questions coming in, but you let me know when you're ready for questions. I'm going to let you manage the last 20 minutes here.
Thanks, Scott. Did anybody have something prepared they wanted to talk about as a lightning talk? I think Wade was going to talk about juggling.
Yeah. Holding the microphone and juggling won't be extremely easy. Got to be closer. How's that? Better? Better good or better better? All right. So here we go. So we got into the test coach camp, and after a couple of days, we had a couple people that said, you know, we're all here talking about coaching. Let's actually do some coaching and not just talk about it. So I have had some experience with juggling, and every time I pull out my juggling balls, it seems someone wants to say, hey, I want to do that. And they want to come, try it out. So have had some experience coaching juggling, have had some experience teaching people and teaching my peers how to do this. So we took an hour and stood up, and we had 10 or 15 people standing around all trying to juggle. And the the process of teaching juggling was interesting, but the really important part that we pulled out of it, in terms of what our goal was setting up this environment and setting up, how individuals learned, how people were enabled and empowered to learn to juggle. But it was really how they were empowered to learn was what we were focusing on. And some of the key points that we pulled away from everything was a focus on the environment, and having that safe to fail environment, because we saw all of our peers failing around us. There were 2 or 3 people that had some basic experience juggling, but for the most part, everyone was dropping balls all over the place. They were just not understanding what was going on. They couldn't get their hands or their arms to do what I was asking them to do, and there was a level of frustration, but it was more of all in fun. Everyone was kind of working together. So the first point we learned was have that environment where it's safe to fail. We had created that because it wasn't their day job. It wasn't how they were making their money. It wasn't how they were trying to feed their family. It was, we're trying to juggle it and have a fun time, which plays in well with a lot of the coaching games that we use, a lot of the dice game, the set game, the coaching game, whatever. There's all of these tools that we use that I think create that safe environment. Some of them can be turned around, however, to create kind of this, I know the trick to the game, that you have to guess what's in my head, which there was some discussion on how that can be destructive to learning. And it becomes this, I'm going to trick you and I'm not here to help you. So that was a good point that we took away as well. Another thing that we learned was peers were teaching each other. I was trying to go around, I showed everyone in the group how to juggle, the kind of basics and things to work on. But as people were working on that and practicing that, I was kind of going around individually, and I couldn't get to everyone at the same time. So individuals that had some skills, had some ability to teach, were coming around behind me and sharing with those other people that were struggling. It was really interesting to see everyone working together and everyone bringing those skill sets together and learning from their peers. We've just talked for half an hour about learning from your peers, and to see it happen and to see it working was really exciting. I'm trying to remember what some of the other points that we pulled out were. Pretty much covered it, and I think as evidence of my superior coaching skills, Hybe's going to come up and juggle, because as of 3 days ago, he was one of the frustrated ones.
So you want me to do it?
Do it. Scoot over, though.
Here? That's way better than I can do. Nice.
So for all of us that have ever tried to juggle, we know that is pretty impressive right there.
So there you go. Great.
And this is why I ended up even coming over to do the juggling, because it looked so much fun with other people doing it. I thought, even if I fail, at least it'll be a great time.
So we can open that up for any questions, any clarification. Hybe, if you want to mention anything you learned, but that was what I had.
What struck me over Coach Camp at Hull is that doing these simple exercises, there was an interesting guy hitting me with a stick, although he didn't hit me literally, but he was this close. And we did all kind of games, puzzles. Paul did an excellent coaching game with cards. And what struck me is it was a diversified group. Everybody was enthusiastic. Everybody was open to each other. Especially doing these things, nobody would laugh at you, and it felt okay to fail. So that struck me first. And the second thing is, I thought we would talk about testing and coaching, and Well, actually, we didn't do that a whole lot, but all sessions ended somehow back to testing. So that's it's I don't know how to explain it, but starting out with sticks, and a half hour or hour later, we were all talking testing again. So how to apply this in our jobs. So that was kind of cool.
Just real quick add-on was the physicality of what we were doing with the balls or the sticks or the whatever, the games, the hands. I think that really got the blood flowing, got the brain thinking, engaging. And one of the things I learned was, and I did it before, but I want to do even more with, like anytime I do an exercise, I always have a prop. I want more physical, more active, more people. There's a more variety of people that can respond to it, and it tends to go over well.
I feel like this has actually in some ways answered my previous question about, what do you do when you're not the official authority, and how do you get other people to listen to your coaching? And maybe part of the answer is set up an opportunity for someone else to coach you and create that general environment of let's learn together. Even if you think you're the one with all the answers, maybe having someone else teach you something first will set up a place where people start feeling safer to fail, safer to ask questions, safer to waste time doing things wrong. And I say that with big air quotes, by the way, because it's not usually a waste of time to do things wrong. You're always going to learn something from it. Sorry, there's no real question in that.
Well, it talks about something that I think was important to me coming here, because I work on a cross-disciplinary team, and so I don't have another tester who I would coach, even as a peer, on a day-to-day basis. I do have other testers in my organization, but the folks who I'm dealing with are from a variety of disciplines, so I can't expect to have the expertise that they have, and it's every day we're working on something together, and we're trying to understand different perspectives. And so I think this pairing aspect is really important, because you have to be open to hearing things that disagree with your assumptions, things that make you question what you're going to do today. You find out something that rocks your world. Who knows? Every day is an adventure, and if you aren't ready to change and be open to that, you can miss it. And there's so much rich experience in these other disciplines that can inform testing, and we've talked about usability in several different sessions, personas, and I think, and management and leadership, and all of these things can help us to become better in our own profession. And it's one of those things that I think there are a lot of lessons that can translate very well. And you wouldn't necessarily think of that. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that juggling would be applicable to, I mean, other than juggling all my tasks, maybe, but, some days do feel like herding cats, and maybe you need to learn some leadership for that. So I think that you have, if you make yourself open to hearing different ideas and saying, I have a lot to learn, and this can translate in some way. It may not be what I need to hear today, but as long as I keep it in mind and I stay open to it, then I can do that experiment next week or next sprint or next release.
And what also helps is what I saw Wade do is he had a lot of fun in throwing those balls around, and the enthusiasm, the passion. That struck me, and I thought, okay, I want to do that. I want to have that smile on my face throwing those balls around, and that's basically what happened all weekend. Is passionate people got together and making things you couldn't do look fun. Well, at least encourages me to try to learn that as well.
The other comment that Hybe made as we were debriefing on the juggling exercise, which I think was one of the better lessons that I learned about over the whole weekend, was empowering people to teach themselves. Hybe made the comment that he had attempted juggling in the past. He bought a set of juggling balls and never had any luck with it, and You know, they're sitting on his bookshelf or something and hadn't touched them in a few years. But when we walked through some of the principles and laid some foundation, laid some groundwork, laid a scaffolding for him to build some knowledge upon, he saw that passion and saw the next step and saw the next way to go. And that theme kind of came up several times, as enabling people to teach themselves, empowering people to learn from themselves through passion, through learning skills, through all sorts of things. And that was a big thing that I took away from the weekend.
So I'm going to summarize and paraphrase here a conversation that with some embedded questions from our viewers, and it boils down to this. You guys had a fabulous, unique experience where you all came together outside of work. You're, generally speaking, not coworkers on the same project with the same boss, that sort of thing. So you removed a lot of the barriers that we sometimes have. And the questions and conversation boils down to this. It's kind of, how do we translate this experience to your peer group at work? Do the is it the organizational leaders that have to create an environment where you can do this kind of thing? Is this something that really boils down to individuals with passion taking it to the pub, as we heard about from Tony Bruce yesterday? Is it something else entirely when we're talking about an established team in a business organization? Thoughts?
I think kind of along the lines of what Matt was saying is there's times where you need to exert influence instead of management or force. And I think that there are times where that can be done in a manager-managed space. I think it's very difficult, and there are a lot of barriers to that. The thing that I've found useful is local peer groups. You know, take it to the pub, get together with people. I kind of fell into a lot of this crowd through the GR Testers, Grand Rapids Testers group. Met Matt. He said, hey, come out to Test Coach Camp, and here I am. And but there's local things that happen on a monthly basis where you have that opportunity to come, kind of get away from the day-to-day project. And I think, like I was saying, stepping away from that project, stepping away where it has create that environment where it's kind of safe to fail and learn, not on your active project, is helpful. That can be with your team. It can be done, if you remove yourselves from the situation, but it's helpful to get insight from other people.
So since we have people following along at home, I think introducing the virtual element is important. Last year, I was on the cast feed, and I was learning from people who were on the live broadcast. And for me, that was very helpful. There were still people, there are still people now who I've been tweeting back and forth with throughout the conference, that you can still reach out virtually and learn from one another. There are certainly blogs and conversations that go on online. And I've had the great experience of actually being able to be coached remotely via Skype with Anne-Marie. And granted, our time zones make that a little bit challenging, but we figured it out eventually. And I don't think that you should limit yourself to the four walls that you're inside all day. If you do that, you won't necessarily find the coach that you need. You won't necessarily find the opportunities that you need. And I think that cross-pollinating is very important. To have a bunch of different exposures, a bunch of different ideas to work with. If you accept that you're going to fail, then you can't stick with just a few. This is something I'm learning from my usability folks, that they're very open to trying a lot of things. You can't just go with the first one that sounds pretty good. You want to find one that's really good. And so you have to keep trying. And I think the more input you have from different sources, the more you're going to accomplish. And so I think that while there is a desire to apply that in my team where I am on the job every day, that if I'm not getting the stimulation that I need there, then there are lots of opportunities, and one of them is this interplay. I mean, it's wonderful that we're able to get these questions from people who aren't attending, because I felt really included last year when I was online and got to throw out something for one of the lightning talks. It was great, and here I am now. The more that you engage with other people, the more they want to engage with you. The more you reach out, the better your relationships can be, the more safe the environment becomes. And I think that you shouldn't limit yourself to just the physical arrangement, but you can work differently yourself, and when you bring that into the business place, then it gives other people permission to try things. And I think trying things is something that doesn't sound like fail fast or any of these emotional triggers, but trying things, experimentation is a really good way to learn.
So I've got 2 ideas. The first one being, if you can't get collaboration at work is hard, is give up. Ilari, myself, Michael, Anne-Marie, James Bach, I think Michael Bolton, all do some amount, Marcus Gartner, all do some amount of free coaching outside of work. So if, as a manager, you can encourage the person to go get coaching outside of the workplace, go to the pub, go to the users group meeting, go to the conference, and they get better, like, you win. If you want to do it within the workplace, you can work to be invited as a peer, or you could give up on the work environment and do an offsite. And you can find a co-working space. They usually have a little room you can rent for $50 a day, and toys and snacks and all kinds of things, and have a peer workshop within your employees on a Friday or on a Saturday, or give them Monday off, or think of creative ways so that anybody that is at that place in their career, in their life, where, darn it, they just want to work 8 to 5 and don't bother them at lunch. They want to go home and catch the game. Some people are at that place, and you're trying to sort of jiggle and encourage and motivate and at least get them to make the best use of that time as they can. Do an offsite. Actually, I think Wade's done an offsite or onsite or something, and can speak to that the last 60 seconds we've got.
So I was trying to teach in my team that I'm working on now, and Matt gave me the exact same direction of, put together a peer workshop. If you can't get your guys to a conference, bring a conference to you. And through several failed attempts or experiments, after trying several things, I was unable to bring anyone else in. I talked to probably 40 people to see if I could get them to come and talk to my group or do something. We ended up just going upstairs into one of the conference rooms, doing a little peer workshop with just my team and empowering them to teach me. Everyone in the group did a little hour-long presentation. They talked about something about testing that they wanted to talk about. And it didn't create passion in all of them. Some of them are in that part in their career where they just want to work 8 to 5. But it was an incredibly useful or valuable use of those 4 or 5 hours that we sat upstairs, where everyone took the time to prepare. They took the time to think about testing and share what they were passionate about and how that ties to testing. For one of them it was boats. For one of them it was, there you go. For one of them it was, hippie rock music, and it worked for everyone, and we were able to come and grow together.
And if I can say it just once, if power dynamics is an issue, you might want to bring in an outside facilitator. And it could be your brother. Like, who cares? Right?
Okay, so officially we're probably a couple seconds over. We're not running that tight on time, but what I'd like to, whoa, lights are dimming. That's cool. Anyway, what I'd like to do is just very briefly give folks a chance to do a checkout, is what we call it in peer conference land. So if we just pass the mic around, any parting thoughts, just a couple seconds, and then we'll take our break and reset the room for the rest of our lightning talks.
It's been great. Thanks for letting me speak to you.
Well, closing thoughts on Test Coach Camp. I think the most valuable thing that I learned at Test Coach Camp was actually just being with people. Oh, more to center. That's the thing I enjoyed most, just spending time with people I've known over Twitter and through other sources. I found that's the most valuable part of Test Coach Camp.
I would echo that as well. We were setting our expectations kind of the first day of the workshop, and I mentioned things about coaching and teaching and testing, but really the networking and the relationships was kind of my biggest goal for being there for the couple days, and it definitely paid off, and got to know a bunch of the people that I had met in the virtual space and connect, and I now feel empowered to go learn some more and teach and continue on in my career.
My closing thoughts on Coach Camp is, also I echo that what these guys are saying. The best part for me is that I met 29 other peoples that are crazy enough to spend their whole weekend in a room without windows, while it's 30 degrees outside and we have a swimming pool and they had beer, and we were doing silly games with juggling balls and sticks. Huh? Celsius. Yeah, it was Celsius. Yeah, sorry guys, I'm Dutch. So, and a lot of them I think I wouldn't have met via another way. So great. Add it to my network.
So again, to mirror and to add to a lot of these comments, I've had a chance to be involved in a lot of communities in my life, and I've had a chance to have a lot of passions in my life. Being a musician, being a snowboarder, being a scout leader. For many years, testing was an afterthought, or I shouldn't say an afterthought, it was my job that allowed me to pursue my other passions. And at a certain point, I decided, why isn't testing a passion? Why isn't it something that I'm passionate about? And again, I realized that the reason for that was because just the nature of the work I was doing, I wasn't engaging with very many people. Once I started engaging with the people, then it became something much more important and much more valuable to me. And that sense of community and that sense of drawing together really made a big difference. And that's actually one of the big things I took away from Test Coach Camp too, was you never know where that community energy is going to drive and where you're going to be able to learn from some really cool areas that you never considered. When I saw the post about coaching testers, I could coach testers better if I could hit them with a stick. I thought it was funny. I just thought it was a funny topic, and I didn't realize that he was talking about kendo and how the kendo discipline and the maturity that goes with it. That was a huge aha moment, and there's several blog posts I think are going to come out of that. But that's what I mean. You never know where the energy is going to go, and that's what makes this really exciting.
All right, well, I get the last word. So I think one of the biggest things for me is trying new things. Find alternatives and find the people who can give you those alternatives. And don't be afraid to experiment, because that's the way we learn. And this whole weekend was about finding new ways to approach problems and try them out and do things that I would never have set myself up to do on my own. And to do that and come through it, I feel really excited about going back to work and trying new things there. So I think you can definitely learn from peers, learn from those around you of any stripe. And I encourage you guys to keep doing that. So thank you.